Hey, we're back. Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. I'm Jamey Eisenberg. That's Dave Richard. That's Heath Cummings. Why do I keep screwing up your name all day today?
I'm not sure.
Heath Cummings, Dave Richard, I'm Jamey Eisenberg. It's been a while since we've been here together doing this show, so we're glad to be back. It's week 6. We've got a big game tonight, Thursday night, between the Giants and the Eagles. Should be a fun one there. And you've got a lot of fantasy football information to give to you for your starts and sits to get you covered, looking at our rankings. So we'll start right there with the quarterback rankings. It's going to be fun to discuss this position because a lot of big questions. We know Lamar Jackson's still not expected to play. That's not fun. We have 2 teams on a bye with the Texans and the Vikings. So for those of you who've been leaning on C.J. Stroud, not going to have him, and obviously not going to have whoever's starting for the Vikings when they come off their bye. But let's show you the rankings here, the 1 through 12 quarterback rankings here, looking at the guys that we consider must-start options. And we're going to discuss the toughest player to rank at this position, something that we do quite a bit here. And you don't see, I guess we'll go kind of with the names on the list here, but we'll start with your guy, Heath, and that's Jayden Daniels. And so a guy that came back last week after a 2-game absence, did not play great, but that had a lot to do, I think, with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt and what he was able to accomplish. Taking on the Bears, why was he tough to rank?
He's tough to rank because he was my number 1 quarterback coming into this year. I think he's a fantastic player, and he has a great matchup against the Bears. The downside is I didn't think he looked 100% healthy or comfortable last week. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt was awesome, and that same bad Bears defense that could be good for Jayden Daniels could be great for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and he doesn't have Terry McLaurin. So I'd like to rank him as a top 3 option. My projections actually put him closer to 11 or 12. And so I think you're probably still starting Jayden Daniels, but there's some names ahead of him on this list that you could have with Jayden Daniels that you might start over on.
And you may have picked up a Matthew Stafford or a Dak Prescott or some of the names, like you said, that you see there, Jordan Love, who's got a great matchup as well against the Bengals. But you would, I guess the big question is if you have Jayden Daniels and drop that other quarterback, would you go back and pick him up?
If I have Jayden Daniels, I'm not adding anybody else. If I added Matthew Stafford while Daniels was out, and I have Stafford and Daniels, I'm starting Stafford.
Okay, interesting there. I probably would agree. Let's go down to the other list because I want to talk about 2 guys that Dave and I have as tough players to rank for this week, and that's the list 13 through 24. So the number 2 quarterbacks, which is where these guys are sort of living at this point. One guy on the cusp there, and Justin Fields. The other one would be Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, 3 games at home this season. 20 or more fantasy points, taking on the Cardinals.
Yeah, it looks good, but you know who also does well is Jonathan Taylor, and I think this matchup is going to be another big game for Jonathan Taylor. We haven't seen Daniel Jones using his legs a lot in his last 3 games, and he's topped out at like 20.7 fantasy points in each of his last 3 games. He's been lower than that in 2 of the 3. And so I'm a little bit nervous about putting him in that same group that was on the first list, that top 12 quarterback list, because I'm not sure he's got that same type of upside, especially in a game where Arizona might not be able to compete on the scoreboard.
When we have the quarterbacks 13 through 24, you're looking at guys like Sam Darnold. You're looking at guys like Mac Jones, who's expected to start with Brock Purdy out. Would you start them over?
Both of them over Daniel Jones for sure.
Okay, so interesting there just based on what we've seen, body of work over the course of the season. For me, the toughest guy to rank for this week is Justin Fields. And the thing that I love about Justin Fields, obviously the last 2 games he's been over 29 fantasy points. 3 games this season that he's been able to finish over 29 fantasy points. Now he's taking on a Denver defense that does not allow rushing production to quarterbacks. 13 carries, 15 rushing yards, 1 touchdown on the season to opposing quarterbacks. And we're not talking about guys that don't run. We're talking about Justin Herbert, been one of the best running quarterbacks this season. Jalen Hurts last week did not run on the Broncos. I don't know if that's by design or just by their defense. I'm going to guess it's their defense. So for me, Fields outside the top 12. Where do you guys come out on Justin Fields for this week?
I still have him. I think I have him exactly 12th in my rankings, Jamey, and it's because what I saw last week from him, the first half of that game against Dallas, he was dreadful. And then garbage time kicked in. The Cowboys weren't rushing him like crazy, and he put up 22 of almost 30 fantasy points in the 4th quarter of that game. And this could be the exact same situation. And I don't want to start anybody just because of that, but he's also been a little bit better throwing against man coverage. He's been a little bit better when he's pressured. Denver's probably going to do those things. They did those things to him last year when he was on Pittsburgh. There's too much upside there. And so if I knew for sure that Denver could absolutely shut him down on the ground, then I'd be out on Justin Fields as well. But I think he'll be able to run a little bit. I think he'll throw just enough to be okay for fantasy this week. And if I'm wrong and he ends up running for 2 touchdowns, then it's going to be a great week for Justin Fields.
It's just the poor version of the Jayden Daniels argument, I think. You know the guy has the ability to go score 30 fantasy points, and how low are you going to rank somebody that might do that? I think it's the difference between him and Daniel Jones. Jones did that once this year, but we don't think in this spot with the way he's been running he has that upside. Fields does.
It's just you don't want to wait to see 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns
Oh, you don't watch him.
No,
don't watch him play.
But that was against Dallas, though. Denver can
Denver's defense is definitely better.
suffocate him and make this terrible, terrible performance. So if you can get away from Justin Fields, I think we would all start Matthew Stafford, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Fields.
And Jordan Love, too. You mentioned him.
Jordan Love,
Jane Daniels.
And again, if you want to go the Mac Jones, Sam Darnold, maybe Daniel Jones route over Justin Fields,
They're
just based on the matchup. All right, let's get into some starts and sits for the position because, again, a lot of people have some questions about some of these guys that are, in some cases performing poorly or have some difficult matchups. So the starts, Heath, you got Matthew Stafford. Dave, you got Drake May. I got Dak Prescott. Heath, we'll start with you. So in the case of Matthew Stafford, I'll just bring this up before you get into the positives and the negatives, if there are any negatives. The weather could be an issue in Baltimore. So that's something that we've discussed on our podcast and a little bit elsewhere. Potential rain. And I don't know, that may change some things for you, but just in terms of Stafford taking on Baltimore, what are your expectations?
I don't worry too much about weather on Wednesday or Thursday usually because rain's not going to make me change it. It's wind, and wind forecasts on 4 days in advance are not very reliable. If the wind's over 20 miles per hour, I'll be downgrading Matthew Stafford. He might still be ahead of Justin Fields. This has just been a fantastic start for Matthew Stafford. He has arguably the top 2 wide receivers in the NFL in terms of a duo. He is putting the ball where it's supposed to be. 11 of their 14 touchdowns on the season have been through the air. Baltimore is stopping absolutely nothing. I think it's just really simple math. When you have a quarterback averaging 24 fantasy points per game, and he's facing a defense that's giving up 28 fantasy points per game, you start that guy.
We saw the Ravens make a couple of moves this week. They added C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They traded for Alohi Gilman. That's helped for their secondary. I don't care one bit. This is a Matthew Stafford huge game ahead. Same thing for Kyren Williams on the ground. You're going to start your Rams in this matchup. That defense still isn't going to be good enough, nor are they going to put pressure on Stafford. That's a huge key. As long as the weather's nice, he's a top 6 quarterback.
And Kyle Hamilton and Roquan Smith potentially returning as well. Those guys weren't there last week. And C.J. Stroud, of all people, went for 20-plus fantasy points. So hopefully Stafford, who's been over 700 passing yards the last 2 games, he's been fantastic, keeps it going. All right, Dave, so you got Drake May coming off his worst fantasy game of the season in the biggest win of his career.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And he's taking on the Saints. This is a much easier matchup for him than Buffalo in week number 5. We know the Saints, they're actually pretty good against the run. They have not been good against the pass. 4 of 5 quarterbacks have had at least 20 fantasy points against New Orleans this year. The 5th, last week, Jackson Dart was decimal points away from having 20 fantasy points in the game. And Jackson did it with running. Drake May might be able to do it with running. He might be able to do it with passing. I love that Stephon Diggs is back to being a number 1 receiver. And Hunter Henry has helped him out before, too. This is a top 12 quarterback. I'd start him over Justin Fields this week.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, obviously, with what May should be able to accomplish, and hopefully will continue to do so. And for me, Dak Prescott has been great. Again, it's funny. You lose, you get a situation where May has his best win, doesn't have his best performance. You get a situation like Dak Prescott loses his best receiver, and he starts to play much better from a fantasy perspective. Obviously, a lot had to do with the matchups, playing the Jets last week, for example. But I don't think this Panthers defense is anything that he should fear. This should be a game where the Cowboys do whatever they want to. Javonte Williams should have a big game. George Pickens should have a big game. Jake Ferguson keeps it going. We'll see if maybe they get lucky and you get CeeDee Lamb back, but that's not expected. But just based on what this defense showed last week, gave up over 28 fantasy points to Tua Tagovailoa. I think Prescott has an opportunity to keep it going. So a potential top 5 quarterback. Let's go from the starts to the sits. So for Dave, you're sitting Bo Nix. I'm curious about that one, taking on the Jets. Heath, you're sitting Daniel Jones, which you kind of got into. And for me, it's Jared Goff. So why are you afraid of Bo Nix against the Jets?
It's not afraid of Bo Nix. I'm worried about the upside. And there's a lot of quarterbacks that we've already talked about that have some good upside. I don't think Bo Nix is one of them against a Jets team that's allowed 19 or fewer fantasy points to 3 of the past 4 quarterbacks they faced. Dak had a monster game against them. I don't know if Bo Nix is going to need to have a monster game against them. And he didn't have a monster game last week. Tougher matchup, no question, against Philadelphia. And he played well in the game. But I think this could be a matchup where we see J.K. Dobbins get going even more and a little bit of R.J. Harvey. I like Nix. I don't love Nix. There are too many other quarterbacks that I would take in my top 12.
So Dave said it was hard to rank Daniel Jones. The only thing that was hard for me is I knew I'd have to answer the question, why are you not buying into Daniel Jones yet? And the thing that concerns me is what you said. It's the lack of rushing. Daniel Jones hasn't thrown the ball much all year. He's thrown it efficiently a few times, but it's 30 pass attempts per game. His last 2 games, he has 1 rush attempt in each game. His last 3 games, he does not have a rush attempt inside of the 5-yard line. They've used Jonathan Taylor there a lot. They've used Tyler Warren there a lot. If Daniel Jones isn't producing at least 3 or 4 fantasy points per game with his legs, I don't think he's a top 12 quarterback just with his arm.
It's interesting to see which Daniel Jones will show up again at home. 20 or more fantasy points in all 3 games, but can he do it one more time against a Cardinals defense that's just been so hard to trust? Their opponents have been so favorable. It's been the easiest schedule in terms of facing opposing quarterbacks. But we'll see if they can do it one more time and just slowing Daniel Jones up
too.
And I don't know, and I think to your point, it's not so much about the Cardinals, it's about what Daniel Jones will or will not accomplish. For me, it's about Jared Goff. We know this isn't the best setup for him going outdoors against a very good defense. He played them last year in Kansas City. He was not great, 250 passing yards, 1 touchdown in his only trip ever to Arrowhead, and I think it's going to be tough for him to have another big game there. Just what we've seen, 3 outdoor games so far. Bad against the Packers, didn't have to do much against the Ravens, great against the Bengals. Well, clearly it's great against the Bengals. So I think with what the Chiefs have shown you so far, only 1 quarterback so far this season, multiple passing touchdowns against them. That was Justin Herbert. Wasn't in America, doesn't really count. So I think you look at Jared Goff right now, somebody that you can get away from for this week. This just isn't the best setup for him. Next week it's the Bucs. You're going to love Jared Goff. All right, we're going to take a break right now. We come back and get into the running back rankings. Our buddy Robert Turbin is going to join us. You don't want to miss discussing the Chargers running back situation. Who can you trust? Kamani Vidal, Hassan Haskins? We'll get that answer next. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. I'm Jamey, that's Dave, that's Heath, and joining us now, it's our good friend Robert Turbin. Help us break down some of these running back dilemmas that we're dealing with around the NFL. Robert, we appreciate you having us here. We're going to get your takes on a lot of the big stories of the position. But first, let's talk about our rankings and show you the list 1 through 12 of the running back position and some of the guys that may or may not be worth starting this week. Obviously, if they're in the top 12, we're probably going to like them. So I'll show you the list here of 1 through 12. A name that you typically see on this list not there is Derrick Henry. We'll see where he stacks up. Alvin Kamara, another guy that we don't really love for this week. But the running back rankings, 1 through 12, we'll hopefully get them up at some point. In any event, Robert, let me ask you a question. In regards to the Chargers situation, what are we looking at here from the standpoint of who is going to help replace Amari and Hampton?
Yeah, it's a tough one to judge. Obviously, they got 2 guys. It'll just be interesting to see how, Coach decides to use both of them. I lean towards Vidal because he's been there longer. He was drafted by the Chargers. And so I lean, towards him having a little bit more success, but it could easily be a 50-50 split.
Dave, what do you think about that?
I think he's right. I think it is going to be a 50-50 split. It's a running back duo that I don't necessarily want to trust. I know that Nyheim Hines is now there, and he might work into some passing situations as well. It's going to be frustrating, and the fact that they're taking on Miami, it's the only reason why I want to consider one of these running backs, or because I'm desperate because I just lost a bunch of running backs, including Amari and Hampton on my fantasy team. I guess Vidal is the option. I would hope that he touches the ball 10 times. I would hope that he gets me 50 yards and maybe a couple of catches. No real expectations for any of these Chargers running backs.
All right, so we'll see where these guys rank as we show you the next list, 13 through 24, and then 25 through 36, which is actually where they're probably going to end up from a consensus standpoint. So we see a lot of the rookie running backs obviously populating the rankings, understandably so. Ashton Genty's been good. Quinshon Judkins has been great since he's gotten back on the field. Again, no Amari and Hampton. We got Cam Scatteraboo going tonight. We'll see where he actually ends up performing, or how he ends up performing now that we don't have, or that we do have Tyrone Tracy on the field. So I want to ask the guys here, if you could have one rookie running back for the rest of the season, as Heath is, you going to make it?
I'm going to try.
Okay, as we get through and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, another rookie running back, as you see here in the top 20. You get to your choice. One rookie running back rest of the season. Who would it be and why? Let's start with you, Robert. Who's the best one?
Me?
Yep.
Oh, man, this was a tough one for me, but I got to go with Quinshon Judkins in Cleveland. You look at just what he's been able to do since he stepped on the field, and I had a lot of doubts about this kid because he had a lot of practice time. He was away from the team, and there was some conversation, obviously, about him going back to college, but, he's stepped on the Browns' practice turf and, essentially taken off right away, and they're going to continue to lean on him a lot. And so for me, it's Quinshon Judkins.
It's Quinshon Judkins for me too, Robert, and we've seen it now, 16.5 PPR points in 2 of his last 3 games. It should have been each of his last 3 games. He had about 70 yards and a touchdown called back by penalties last week. I love the Browns schedule. Rest of season, I have it projected as very favorable. I think that helps. And against almost any opponent, I could see 2 touchdown upside for Quinshon Judkins. He's that good. He's the rookie running back that I want.
So, Heath, I know you like Quinshon Judkins, but your answer is a little bit different. Who are you going with if you have one rookie running back rest of the season?
I just have a hard time when we were all, for the last 8 months, pretty sure that Ashton Jeanty was this generational running back that was the best in the class. And his last 2 games, he has a combined 259 yards from scrimmage. I can't go away from that guy. I still think that Ashton Jeanty is who he is. Quinshon Judkins and Ashton Jeanty might both be top 5 running backs the rest of the season. I love both of these guys, but I'm sticking with Jeanty.
I wonder if, and Robert, I'll start with you just to kind of go back to the Chargers situation. If Hampton was healthy, no issues, ready to go, where would he factor in? Would he be ahead of Judkins and Jeanty, or would he be just in the mix with those guys?
He would be ahead of Jeanty for me, but Judkins would still be at the top. And I think for me, Omarion Hampton was really kind of on this trajectory where he was just continuing to get better, finally sort of found his pace and his rhythm and his speed within the NFL game. And I thought he was going to do nothing but get better. Jeanty, on the other hand, still a very good player, but I just think the Raiders and their situation offensively pretty tough right now. And I don't know if he'll be a top 5 guy towards the end of the year, but I would have had Hampton above Jeanty had he not gotten hurt.
Understandably so, and we hope to get him back. Hopefully it's just the 4 weeks that he's out with that ankle injury. All right, let's go from the younger running backs to the older running backs. We have 2 guys that are a little bit questionable situations for just week 6. Things may change for both of these guys moving forward. There could be a trade in the case of Alvin Kamara. There could be the quarterback coming back, hopefully, in the case of Derrick Henry. But Henry's struggling right now. Kamara's struggling right now as they enter week 6. So which of these 2 guys, Robert, again, I'll start with you, worry you the most just for this week? Again, does not have to be long-term. If you want to factor that in, that's fine. But just for week 6, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry. And if the answer is none, please feel free to say none. But I think both these guys could be a little bit tough to trust.
Well, I think it's tough for me to trust Alvin Kamara at this particular stage, even though he does more. You think about like what he brings to the table, his impact, being able to catch the football off the field. But we just haven't seen that, much this season from him, a heavy dosage of it at least. And so I think that's going to continue. For Derrick Henry, it's going to be all about him offensively this week. He's going to be center stage in terms of, production offensively for the Ravens. And so I trust Derrick Henry to be able to bounce back from his early season struggles, not so much Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, if it was rest of season, I'd feel a lot better about Henry. I still think that what Robert said is right. Kamara is the one we're most concerned about this week. Kamara is also the one we're most concerned about rest of season. Kendre Miller, his role keeps growing, and for good reason. Alvin Kamara is averaging 4.0 yards per touch. That combines your receptions and your yards. It is a career low. Back when he was really like one of the superstars of fantasy, he was around 5, 6, 7 yards per touch. The last few years, it's been right around 5. He just keeps declining. It's a terrible team. He's not been a good running back this year, and he's losing touches to a younger guy. It's terrifying.
He took on the Giants at home last week, and he didn't even have 10 PPR points. I can't believe we're saying that about Alvin Kamara. And I know that Derrick Henry, I don't think he had 10 PPR points either last week. So both these guys were total disasters.
And Henry scored.
And Henry scored on top of that. That's a really good point. When's the last time Kamara has even scored? It's been a while. Earlier, it might have been week one. Yes, thank you. So I'm definitely more nervous about Kamara than Derrick Henry this week, but nervous about both.
So I'm more concerned about Henry for this week. I'm more concerned about Kamara for the rest of the season. I just hate the setup with Cooper Rush taking on a Rams defense that has yet to allow a running back to score a rushing touchdown. And at this point in the season, in this week, Henry needs to score a touchdown to help his fantasy production. At least for Kamara, he had 4 catches last week, so that could still save him from a PPR standpoint. I don't think Henry's going to get 4 catches. Does he even have 4 catches on the season? Like, this is just the point of the
I think he does.
Of where we are for this particular week. I know, like Robert said, I agree. They're going to try and feed Derrick Henry. But against this run defense, it's been fantastic against teams that have fully stocked offenses. Christian McCaffrey could not run on this team. I don't think Derrick Henry, in the current state of what the Ravens are right now, is going to have a lot of success. So if he does not score, your fantasy production will be minimal. 50 yards rushing or under 50 yards rushing in each of his last 4 games. So I'll take Kamara slightly ahead of Henry. I would like to avoid both of them. All right, let's get to some starts and sits for the position for this week. So, Robert, when we look at the starting options for you, who's a start running back or running backs that you may be looking at for week number 6?
Oh, man. Who did I put on the list there? I'm trying to think who I had.
Maybe turn around and take a look at some of your jerseys and see, what you like there.
What's on there? I think Tony Pollard is a good choice this week. He's not the guy that I had on the list that you sent me, though. But
you had the Seattle running backs. You like the Seattle running backs this week.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, don't talk about Tony. That's my guy.
He didn't need to think about it to say good things about Seattle.
Get a clue, Turbo. Get a clue. Yeah, no, I like both of these guys for this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I couldn't pick one or the other because I think they're both going to have success against this Jaguars defense, who's actually pretty good. But I think that the Seahawks and Coach Kubiak have found a formula of how he likes to use this 1-2 punch. And the last couple of weeks, they've been both been able to have success when they're both healthy. And so if you're a fantasy manager, any of these backs for Seattle, I think should be a good start for you this week.
If you can only pick one, though, who would it be? Would it be Ken Walker or would it be Charbonnet?
I'd probably go with Ken Walker. Just because he's really starting to come along the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, just losing those touchdowns to Charbonnet. Let's see him get maybe one crack at the end zone, and that would certainly make a lot of fantasy managers happy in that case.
They got to give him the ball in the goal line area, man.
They got to give him the ball in the goal line area. You know who scored the last, at least 2 of the last 3 games? That's Tony Pollard. So, Dave, you like the setup for him. We had some discussions about maybe sitting Pollard on our podcast today, but make the case why Pollard should be in those lineups.
First of all, he's getting a lot of work. Even in Tyjae Spears' first game back, Pollard played over 70% of the snaps. He dominated on third downs. He dominated inside of the 10-yard line. Those snaps are pretty important, and we've seen him catch 3 passes each of the last 2 games. And he's taking on the Raiders. This is a team that is top 10 in most fantasy points allowed to running backs this season. We've seen some RBs get huge games against Vegas. This is actually a favorable matchup for the Titans' run game. Pollard leads it.
It is a favorable matchup for most run teams. I'm not sure the Titans are good enough to take advantage of a favorable matchup. They
did last week.
4.8 yards per attempt. He had 67 yards rushing, like 78 total yards. And the thing they say after the game is, Tyjae Spears' role is going to get bigger. I'm not sure you can count on 14 rushes and 13 receptions. And we've talked a lot, and you said it a couple times on the podcast this morning, like this is a game where the Titans could play from ahead. I think it's important to remember they're still 4.5-point underdogs against the Raiders. Like that's how bad the Tennessee Titans are. I understand if you have to start Tony Pollard, but those veteran running backs we were talked about being worried about, I would rather start Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara than Tony Pollard.
And you like DeAndre Swift as a start this week?
I like DeAndre Swift a lot more than I like Tony Pollard this week. And I think I've seen a lot more talk on social media and in our questions about how inefficient DeAndre Swift has been. And I understand that. But he's still getting 17 touches a game. He's now healthy coming off of a bye. The offensive line should be a little bit better with extra rest. We've been kind of waiting we've gotten the 11-point, the 12-point, maybe the 14-point DeAndre Swift game. We haven't had the 18 or 20-point game. I think that might be coming this week.
Ran through that Commanders defense last year. Hopefully does so again in the rematch. Maybe get a different ending, or maybe a more fun ending like we saw last year with the Hail Mary. For me, at the start of the week is Rachaad White, so he's the start running back for this week. Love what I saw from him in the passing game with 4 catches. 3 of the last 4 running backs against San Francisco, 18 PPR points or more. Should be a great setup for Rachaad White as he gets one more start in place of Bucky Irving. Let's go from the starts to the sits. So, Robert, you got an interesting guy here on the list. It's Amari DiMercato. Is he even going to see the field for the Cardinals after that terrible play that he had last week?
Exactly. That's my point. Because he's good enough to see the field. It's not about his talent or skill. When he's gotten his opportunity, he's done really well, surprisingly, right? But after the altercation last week, I think a lot of the load for running back is going to go to Michael Carter. And so from that standpoint, if you have DiMercato on your roster, I'd be real shaky about starting him if you haven't done your homework about how the Cardinals are going to be moving forward. And so I would sit him in this situation this week.
Heath, you got Tony Pollard as your sit. You made the case why. Dave, Chase Brown, quickly, why is he somebody you want to get away from?
He's finished outside of the top 24 in PPR each of the past 4 weeks. He's taking on the Packers. That's a tough matchup. And he just hasn't been great. Certainly his rushing inefficiency has been a big, big problem. He's going to need to catch a lot of passes. Now that Joe Flacco is the quarterback in Cincinnati, I think Flacco's going to throw downfield. I don't think he's going to check it down like he did in Cleveland. That's bad for Chase Brown.
All right, we'll see if Brown does benefit with his role in the passing game, but has been allergic to the end zone not scoring a touchdown since week 1. For me, I'm going to get away from Jaylen Warren, at least for this week. I just want to see what happens, taking on a very tough Cleveland Browns defense. Kenneth Gainwell, we don't know what his role will be. We expect Warren to get the job back, but will he still have the same workload that he had prior to getting hurt, missing that game in week 4, and then Gainwell was just an absolute star against the Minnesota Vikings. So if you can get away from Jaylen Warren, that's something I think you should do. All right, that'll wrap it up for our running back conversation. Robert, we appreciate your time as always, and we look forward to seeing those Seattle running backs take apart that Jacksonville run defense. We're going to take a break here right now. We come back and get into the wide receivers, tell you the starts and sits, look at our rankings, help you out with those lineup decisions. Stay right here to Fantasy Football Today. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. I'm Jamey, that's Dave, that's Heath. We're taking a look at the wide receiver rankings for week number 6. And Heath, you said we got some good news, right? Terry McLaurin showing up at practice, so he might be able to play.
Terry McLaurin showing up at practice. I don't know what he's done at practice. I mean, he may just be there watching. I think he's wearing a uniform. Hopefully he practices in full. That would make me feel much better about ranking Jaden Daniels.
All right, so we do not have Terry McLaurin ranked. We also don't have a few other wide receivers that are still dealing with injury. CeeDee Lamb, for example, Ricky Pearsall, not expected to play. Juwan Jennings also still dealing with an injury. And no Darius Slayton expected to play tonight. But he would not be in the top 12. Here's the top 12, what we're looking at here. Puka Nacua continues to dominate. Jackson Smith and the Jigba obviously off to a great start. Jamar Chase still at number 4. Dave, do we still feel great about Jamar Chase? Where do we come out with the Joe Flacco news now that he's going to be the starter?
I'm a little more optimistic about both Chase and T. Higgins with Joe Flacco at quarterback. Not that he throws a laser football or anything like that, but just the simple fact that he is a YOLO quarterback who is willing to challenge downfield. He doesn't seem to be flustered too much by pass rush pressure, and he knows he's got 2 good wide receivers to throw to. I think the balls will be better placed coming from Flacco than they were from Jake Browning.
Let's see the list 13 through 24 as we continue to cycle through the wide receiver rankings, and then we can go right to 24 to 36. But on this list is where we get one of the toughest players to rank for at least the 2 of you guys, and that's Garrett Wilson. So, Heath, I'll give you the first word. How do we think Wilson's going to do against this tough Denver secondary?
Well, if I knew for sure, he wouldn't be the most difficult player to rank. But what I'll say is the reason it's so hard is because Garrett Wilson's a top 5 wide receiver this year. He's number 3 in target share. He's the only guy Justin Fields wants to throw to. And he's facing Pat Surtain and a Denver Broncos defense that has shut down almost every number 1 wide receiver they faced, not Quentin Johnston, because, of course, who could ever shut down Quentin Johnston? How low do you rank one of the best wide receivers in fantasy when they're facing the best corner in fantasy? Where you see him here at 24 is just about where I've settled on him. I think if you're in a 2 wide receiver league, you're trying to get away from him. If you're in a 3 wide receiver league, you have to start him.
And my general operation is when a stud receiver takes on a stud cornerback, I lean toward the receiver. I just go with that. In this case, though, history plays a role. If you're a history major, maybe this will make you want to sit Garrett Wilson. He took on the Broncos 2022, 2023, 2024. He's never scored on them. He's never topped 54 yards on them. He's never had more than 5 catches in a game against them. And specifically, when he's been covered by Patrick Surtain, 10 targets, 5 catches, nothing good going on, 58 total yards. That's over 3 years of play against Patrick Surtain. That's tough.
If you're my doctor, I want a different surgeon if this is your operation, because I don't want to go against Patrick Surtain with Garrett Wilson. You mentioned it already. Jamar Chase did not play well in this situation. Michael Pittman did not play well in this situation. A.J. Brown did not play well in this situation. I think it's going to be tough for Garrett Wilson. He's a sit for me. You'll see that when we get to our starts and sits. The toughest player for me to rank is in the same game. It's Courtland Sutton taking on Sauce Gardner, who's done a very good job at limiting opposing wide receivers as well. Sutton also has been fantastic. He's been the go-to guy for Bo Nix. A very good sleeper for this week. I know Heath will agree. Troy Franklin, because he's going to be that second guy and the second receiver opposite the number 1 guy for facing the Jets. Calvin Austin in week 1. We saw it last week, I believe it was. I'm blanking. But it's happened a few times so far this season. The number 2 receiver opposite Sauce Gardner has done well facing the Jets, and I think Troy Franklin's an opportunity this week. I think Courtland Sutton's still a number 2 wide receiver, but not necessarily a slam dunk. I still would start him in 2 receiver leagues, but if you can't get away from him, that's probably the smart move to make. Let's go now to the start and sits for the wide receiver position. So, Dave, you got both Chargers wide receivers, at least 2 of the 3, not named Quentin Johnston. You got Keenan Allen and Ladd McConkey. How do you think they're going to do against the Dolphins defense that hasn't given up a lot of production to opposing wide receivers?
The reason why they haven't given up a lot of production, Jamey, is because teams have been able to run on them. And I don't think the Chargers, between their 3rd-string running backs and their depleted offensive line, are going to be able to run. And Justin Herbert, he'll be under pressure because of that offensive line. And when he's been under pressure, he looks for Keenan Allen and he looks for Ladd McConkey. And I think those two guys help make up what lacks in the run game for the LA Chargers. I still like Quentin Johnson the most, but all three of these wide receivers are top 24 options in PPR.
Heath, you like Chris Olave taking on that Patriots defense in the game between New Orleans and New England. How do you think he's going to do? Is he going to score? Is he going to get more than 50 yards receiving? Like, which Chris Olave shows up?
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's going to score, and he may not get more. He may not need more than 50 yards receiving to be a must-start wide receiver because he gets 10 to 12 targets every single week. And the Patriots' pass defense, I think you're going to be really careful looking at what they've done so far this year and thinking it's a good matchup. They've got Christian Gonzalez back. They've been much better. But I trust Kellen Moore to scheme Chris Olave up, move him around the formation, put him in motion, put him in the slot. He's going to see double-digit targets. There's a chance he also scores in the game. I was pretty impressed with the way Spencer Rattler played last week against the Giants. I think this game might be a little closer than people are thinking it's going to be. But when you have a guy that gets 10 targets almost every single week, you should just start that guy in full PPR.
In half and non, would you consider starting him?
Probably not starting in non-PPR. In half, he's a high-end wide receiver 3.
All right, so the sliding scale based on the format, but clearly he's done a nice job catching the ball. For me, it's going to be Teteroa McMillan. He's going to get his first NFL touchdown in Week 6, taking on the Cowboys. They've been miserable against opposing wide receivers. McMillan is due. Now, we'll see if Jalen Coker returns this week. He's been able to practice. That's somebody I think can impact the Panthers. Maybe in a positive, though. Take a little pressure off of McMillan. He's gotten 8+ targets in every game so far this season, and this is the game where he's going to finally start to have that breakout performance. So I love McMillan as a top 15 wide receiver. Could potentially have the best game of his career to date. 16 PPR points so far has been his high. Maybe he cracks that 20-point per game range, 20-point threshold if he finally gets into the end zone. This is going to be a big game for the rookie for Carolina. Let's go now to the sits. We already talked about one of those guys for me, and that's Garrett Wilson. Heath, you guys I think differ on this a little bit because I think, Dave, you're a little bit more optimistic about Joe Flacco's influence on the Bengals and maybe T. Higgins. But Heath, you're still staying away from Higgins in this game against.
So I'm the guy who was touting Jerry Jeudy all offseason and David Njoku all offseason because they were going to be playing with Joe Flacco. That was going to make things better.
Right.
I'm also the guy, but because of that, for the first month of the season, I watched a lot of the Browns. Yes, I've been gouging my eyes out.
Yikes.
Joe Flacco, the first month of this season is not the Joe Flacco that we saw a couple of years ago in Cleveland. He's not the guy slinging the ball down the field. Part of the problem is because the Browns' offensive line couldn't give him the time to do that. You know the only offensive line that's been graded as worse than the Browns' offensive line this year? It's the Bengals. I do think there's going to be a bunch of dump-offs to Chase Brown because Joe Flacco would like to live long enough to play through the next week. I just don't think he's the same guy. The offensive line is absolutely awful. Hopefully T. Higgins scores a touchdown. That's your only hope.
I think T. Higgins can score a touchdown because I think there's going to be no choice but for the Bengals to throw and play from behind against the Green Bay Packers. So I think volume wins the day. We've seen it now with Jamar Chase multiple times this season. We've seen it with T. Higgins before, too. I think Chase is going to get more targets than T, but T. Higgins can still have a decent game. So he's on the fence for me, low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3.
Now, would you be starting T. Higgins over the guy that you say to sit, which is DK Metcalf?
I would, because I'm nervous about DK Metcalf in this specific situation against Joe Flacco's former team, the Browns. We know they love to put pressure on the quarterback. We know they play a lot of man coverage. And we know that when Aaron Rodgers is under pressure, he's getting rid of that ball quickly, and it generally does not go to DK Metcalf in that situation. And when it's man-to-man coverage, usually there's a blitz along with it, but even when there's not, it's not DK Metcalf that gets the ball there either. He's a flex. I like him as a number 3 wide receiver, but not as a top 24 guy.
Does it help that Calvin Austin is banged up? Does it help that the tight ends haven't really stepped up, that the run game could be sort of taken away here, that maybe Rodgers leans on Metcalf a little more?
No, I think it's going to be an ugly, low-scoring game between two teams with great defenses.
All right, so we'll see how things go for DK Metcalf there. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back and get into the tight ends that you need. This is actually a really good week for tight ends, which means they're going to be terrible. But at least we have optimism going into the week. We'll tell you about the guys that you should be starting and sitting at tight end next on FFT. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. Let's see which legendary tight ends can help you for week number 6. As of now, we're not expecting Brock Bowers to play, still dealing with that knee injury, so not going to see him in the top 12 rankings as we show you that list now. Led by Jake Ferguson. We got Trey McBride at number 2, Tyler Warren number 3. Sam Laporta, Heath, taking on the Chiefs defense that's been really good against tight ends. Do we trust Laporta in this matchup?
I think we've gotten to a point to where like the top 5 or 6 names in the tight end rankings, we're just not going to think about it that much because we've had so many other guys that have filtered up into the bottom half of the top 12, disappointed us, and just dropped completely off the face of the earth.
Is Dalton Kincaid, Dave, now a guy that we just don't forget or just set and forget?
Yeah, he is. Not only is he a must-start fantasy tight end, if you've got him as your second tight end, you can flex him. He just looks like, as you called, Jamey, the guy that can lead Buffalo in catches and yardage this season. He's the best pass catcher that Buffalo's got.
Just get more than 6 targets. He's just capped at 6 targets every week. It would be nice to see.
He's doing pretty darn good things with those 6 targets.
He had a good game last week with 100 yards, but most of it has been touchdown dependent. But yes, he's definitely doing a great job for the Buffalo Bills. Let's show you the list now. 13 through 24, and still tight ends that you can find on this list that you might be considering starting. Guys like Theo Johnson, Jake Tongas, now at least another week without George Kittle there. Dallas Goedert has scored a touchdown seemingly every time he's been on the field. Evan Ingram's playing well. Zach Ertz hopefully will bounce back. So a lot of guys on this list that you could potentially get by with, and as Dave alluded to, might be flex options for you just because of some bad matchups at wide receiver or running back. These tight ends are in some good spots if they continue to play well. Let's talk about the toughest player to rank for this week. So Dave, for you, it was David Njoku. Heath, for you, it's Darren Waller. For me, it's Sam Laporta. Why is Darren Waller tough to rank?
Well, we want to rank him really high because he's played 2 games and he leads all tight ends in fantasy points per game. That seems pretty simple. He's also not a full-time player yet. And the big reason is he's facing Derwin James and the Chargers. They gave up 47 receiving yards to Travis Kelce in week 1. No other tight end has topped 40 receiving yards against this defense. Zach Ertz just played his first game since 2014 without catching a pass. They are completely erasing the tight end from the game right now. And so I'm worried that happens to Darren Waller.
Yeah, the reaction I have to that is Waller isn't a typical tight end. He's much more of a receiver than a blocker and certainly faster than a lot of the tight ends that the Chargers have taken on this year. And the Dolphins need him desperately. He might not be quite as hyper efficient as he's been through the first 2 weeks, but I still think he's a big touchdown candidate. Could catch 4 passes for 40 yards on top of it.
For you, Dave, the guy is David Njoku coming off his best game of the season. First start with Dylan Gabriel. What's tough to rank with him this week?
I'm worried about that continuing on because we did have 4 weeks of David Njoku not being as huge a part in the Cleveland Browns offense to begin the season. I'm hoping it's a connection between Dylan Gabriel and David Njoku. And this is a Steelers defense. They allowed 29 PPR points to Hunter Henry in week 2, 10.8 to A.J. Barner, and then 7.9 or fewer PPR points to the other tight ends they faced. And this also frustrated me. David Njoku plays the Steelers twice every year. Last year, 1 huge game, 17.2 PPR points. The second one, 3.9. Actually, the 3.9 game came first. I'm nervous to trust him. Top 13 type of fantasy tight end, one that I feel better about in PPR than in half and non-PPR.
That definitely makes sense in the format. I'm just going to hope that what we saw last week, Dylan Gabriel leaning on his tight ends, both tight ends finding the end zone, obviously Njoku getting a lot of targets, which is what we were hoping for throughout the course of the season, but maybe the quarterback change is what's going to unlock him. And again, for me, Sam Laporta, a little bit of a concern just based on the matchup against the Chiefs. Chiefs do a very good job against tight ends. Laporta's best game so far came against the team that stinks against tight ends, which was the Cincinnati Bengals last week. So still a set it and forget it type of guy, but somebody maybe just be a little bit cautious about. The start tight ends for us, for Heath, it's Theo Johnson. For you, Dave, it's Jake Tongas. For me, it's Mason Taylor. So not exactly the cookie-cutter names we're used to saying.
Right.
Theo Johnson tonight, what do you think he's going to do against the Eagles?
He had a 20% target share so far on Jackson Dart throws. That was with Darius Slayton playing a majority of the time, or at least a part of that time. Now their number 2 wide receiver might be Tyrone Tracy. Oh, yeah, and their number 1 wide receiver is Wan'Dale Robinson. Right. Not exactly a great option there either. I just think he's going to see the volume. He's the only guy that Jackson Dart looks for in the end zone if the Giants get anywhere close to the end zone in this game. I expect him to be a top 12 tight end.
I wonder if their number 1 wide receiver is Theo Johnson, so that's a good call. He's definitely interesting. I like Jake Tongas, though, and I like him better than Theo Johnson. I like him better than a lot of the tight ends that are kind of middling, and it's because over the last couple of weeks, he's had at least 14.8 PPR points. He did great with Mac Jones last week on 11 targets. You can't ignore that. And the Bucs, 17.7 or more PPR points to a tight end in each of their past 2 games.
Hopefully he continues to play well. Again, we'll find out. Juwan Jennings may be able to practice today. That could change some things for the entire 49ers offense. Ricky Pearsall not expected to practice. That's according to Kyle Shanahan. For me, I'm going to go with Mason Taylor, 25 targets in his last 3 games. Last 2 games, over 11 PPR points. I think based on what we're going to see, Garrett Wilson shut down. This is the only guy I think Justin Fields will be able to rely on. I know Denver knows that, but I think he's worth trusting as a low-end starter based on what we've seen from a target volume each of the last 3 weeks. Let's go to the tight ends that we're sitting this week. Dave, you're sitting Zach Ertz. Heath, you're sitting Juwan Johnson. I'm going to get away from Kyle Pitts. A little bit of a caveat, though, because I did expect Darnell Mooney to return. The best 2 games that we saw from Kyle Pitts this season were with Mooney out. So if Mooney does not play, I'll probably change this and start him and sit him and get Kyle Pitts more of in a starting range. But Heath, why Juwan Johnson? Because he's been really good to start the season. Is he going to pick it back up after a couple down games?
Got a little ankle injury. Taysom Hill's back. Foster Moreau's back. Target share went down. Just don't want to trust it.
Zach Ertz, 30 snaps last week, no catches. Heath already told you about that. In this matchup against Chicago, I feel like this is a Kroenke-Merritt game. He ends up rolling for the Commanders, not as much for the tight end to do.
Maybe gets back to catching a ball for the first time since 2014. Just an amazing stat there with Zach Ertz not catching the ball. All right, we're going to take a break right now. We come back and get to your questions. Thank you for sending them to us on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling that. AskFFT is the hashtag. We'll help you with your fantasy dilemmas next on Fantasy Football Today. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. Your questions, our answers. Let's go. Who would you prefer, Saquon or Chase rest of season? I'm going to assume it's Jamar Chase. So Saquon Barkley, Jamar Chase rest of season. Dave, I guess your trade chart has Barkley +3.
It does. Yeah, no, I would rather have Saquon over Chase, and typically elite running backs have higher value on the trade chart than elite receivers do, and this is the case for that.
Yep, always tough to trade between positions of 2 upper echelon players, but Saquon Barkley does make a little bit more sense at this point. Next question. Half PPR, 1 quarterback dynasty league. I got offered this trade. I'd be the one giving up Jamar Chase. I also have Puka Nacua, Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle, Jamison Williams, Chris Godwin, and Devontae Smith. So would you do it? So you receive Devontae Adams, T. Higgins, and Garrett Wilson. You give up Jamar Chase. You're also getting a 2026 second-round pick. That's a pretty good haul for Jamar Chase.
But 2 years from now, Adams could be out of the league. I think Wilson will have a different quarterback, so he might be even better than what he's been this year. And T. Higgins is still going to be the second banana in Cincinnati. The second-round pick doesn't matter to me. It is a good haul, and if you're trying to win now, I think you make this deal.
Yep, only if you're in a win-now mode. Next question. Interesting trade go through in my league this week. Jamar Chase for Emeka Egbuka. The owner trading away Egbuka likes to think of himself as a fantasy savant, but I think this is a horrible trade, and he is an avid listener to your podcast. I'm sure we'll discuss this on Fantasy Cops on our mailbag on Friday. But, Dave, if you saw this trade go through, would you veto it?
I would not veto any trade as long as it's made between consenting managers in the league. I do have Egbuka valued higher than Chase on the trade chart. I think Egbuka's for real. I think he's a stud. Rest of season, top 5 type of fantasy.
You would rather have Emeka Egbuka than Jamar Chase?
You heard it.
Okay. I'd rather have Chase. I would not veto this deal either, but I can understand why people would question it. Next question. Would you trade away Emeka Egbuka for Drake London in full PPR?
Rather have Egbuka than London. If I'd rather have Egbuka than Chase, you know I'd rather have Egbuka than London.
Yeah, this one I think is closer. Egbuka certainly has proven himself to be a very solid player for a rookie. We'll see what happens, though, when Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are back, but I would not mind this trade right now. Next question. I finally dropped Bashal Tutin for Tracy. Was that smart? Needed to make room on my bench to make moves. So who would you rather have rest of season, Bashal Tutin or Tyrone Tracy?
I'd still rather have Tutin. I'm not sure why you would need to make this move if you needed room on your bench to make other moves, because unless you're starting Tyrone Tracy this week, and if that's the case, I get it. I think I'd rather start Tracy than Tutin in week 6.
I would rather start Tracy than Tutin, but I'd rather roster Tutin than Tracy long term. All right, last question for us now. Have Bijan Robinson, Ashton Genty, Quinshon Judkins, and Javonte Williams. Would you trade any of the Jays for Jamar Chase, and who would it be? I'll just add that caveat there at the end. So which of the running backs here would you trade to get Jamar Chase?
Genty and Judkins would be the first 2, and Javonte as well, but not Bijan.
I would probably trade Judkins just because of the offensive environment could start to really go bad if teams just are able to, at some point, stop him. I think Genty, when everybody's healthy there for the Raiders, can be better. And Javonte has just proven himself one of the best fantasy picks so far this season. All right, thank you for your questions. We appreciate that. We'll answer more throughout the course of our shows on our Fantasy Football Today podcast. You find it where podcasts are available. We are helping you dominate your fantasy leagues. We have the NFC home game previews coming up on Friday. Did the AFC home game previews on Thursday, and we have our mailbag coming up on Friday as well. Don't forget to check us out Sunday morning as well on our YouTube stream. For Heath Cummings, Dave Richard, and our fantastic production staff, as well as Robert Turbin, I'm Jamey Eisenberg. Thanks for watching Fantasy Football Today.